right, guys. How are we doing today? Okay, so you know what? I think I can see three of us probably joining from Twitch. Drop a message in the chat. Drop a message. Um, I can see we have five people now. What we are going to be working on today, unfortunately, our instructor was not able to make it to the class, so I'll be taking over this specific session. We'll be talking about sorting, pagination, and filtering, and we will be using an example. Um, we'll basically create an example. We'll build an API, right? We're going to build an API on this session, and it's going to be a very simple API. We'll work with MongoDB. We'll use Mongoose, and we would also use Express, with Express.js, of course. So, yeah, so I mean, what we'll do is while I'm coding, I would like you to code along. And if you have any questions, along the line, during the class, feel free to drop your question. I'll be looking at the chat, right? I'll be looking at the chat. So if you have any question, just drop a question in the chat immediately, and I will answer that question before I move on. Okay. Yeah. So just to give us, let's see. I think I have. Oh, okay. So I think we have a problem with this. Let me just look for the Excalibur tool. Yeah, because I want us to first of all, kind of like map out what we are going to be doing. I think I should actually delete all these things. We no longer need them. Yeah, so let's take them off. Right. Okay. All right. So I hope this is clear enough. I hope you can see my screen very well. We are going to be building a very simple API, and on this API, let's take down some notes. On this API, we should be able to. Let me zoom in on this first. Okay, so we should be able to, let's call it a book API. So we're going to, create books, and we should be able to fetch those books, like fetch all the books. We should be able to, filter through those books with specific, query parameters. And we should also have the ability to sort those books in ascending or descending order based on you know, um, the specific parameter. So we can choose to sort the books by the title, by the name, by the genre, stuff like that. And finally, we are also going to, paginate the API, which means we can choose to make a request, fetch like 5 items or fetch, 10 items or basically fetch our items page by page, right? Which is pagination. While we proceed, I'll definitely explain what I'll be doing. And of course, we're going to code live, so expect some errors. We're going to be debugging along the line as well. Yeah, so if that is good, if you think that is a very good example, just go ahead, let me know in the chat. I think those options are fine. We just have 1 hour, and I'm not going to take so much of your time. So I'll make it simple and straightforward. Yeah, won't spend a lot of time doing this. So yeah, on our book API, we're going to basically build this using Express.js. We'll be working with Express.js. It's good to always document these things, right? Express, of course, Mongoose, and yeah, so Mongoose is kind of like the wrapper, right, for our MongoDB database when working with Node. So it's basically an ODM, and I'm sure you guys understand some of these things already. So I'm not going to dive into a lot of theories. What else are we going to use? So for testing our API, I'm going to be using this. Basically this is an extension I installed. So this is called let's see, what's the name? Talend API Tester. I can also share that with you. It's the free edition, so Talend API Tester. And I'm using this on my browser, right? Because I'm sure probably using a tool like Postman might look very complicated. Even though we already, had that class and I explained how to use Postman, we would also have to talk about Postman again in the future during a workshop. All right, so this is a very simple tool, Talend API Tester. You can search for this on the Chrome extension store. If you can't find it, let me know and I will share with you probably after the class. All right, so let's just say it's talent for testing. It can be Postman. You can actually use any other tool, right? I think that is all. Okay, so in terms of our routes, so these are basically, yeah, in terms of our routes, we are going to have gets all books, which is slash books. Okay, so we are also going to have a couple of other routes like filter routes, and this will basically be. Can I just? Okay, maybe I think what I would do instead. So all books, and I would have the filter route, which is probably books slash filter for these books. Then I would have books slash paginates. All right. I would also have books slash sorts. All right, I think this is fine, right? Yeah, then we can also create a book, okay? So we'd also have slash books, the first one would be to get all books. And this second one will be to basically post, right, which is to create a book. And these items are basically get requests. They're all going to be get requests. All right, so I hope you understand this. This is not the best way to document your API. Of course, we have an upcoming class where I would, teach you how to use basically how to design APIs, right? That happens to be one of the core things I love to do, designing APIs, documenting, talking about API governance, and a bunch of other things, a bunch of jargons that I believe you would love. So with time, we'll get to talk about that, and you will learn how to design APIs like a pro. All right, so this is what we have for now. I think we can basically start implementing this already. So I'm going to open up my terminal, and I have made this very big already, so I hope you can see this very well. I am going to set up a new project, so let's create a new project, and I will call this book API, oh yeah, backend book API, okay? All right, so let's open up the backend book API. So I'm going to create a couple of files. The first file here will be my server.js, which is our main entry file. And I am also going to, yeah, we can just proceed to, set up set up initialize npm. So I think init dash y. But we're going to have all our code base in a single file. I don't think we really need to, separate them since this is just a very simple example. So let us initialize npm, and the next thing we'll do is to install Express, right? So if you're working with Express, of course, by default, you have you can use the express.json library, to work with JSON files. Back in the day, we use body parser. Yeah, we use body parser for, I think it's spelled body parser, but this is no longer, a must have. You can actually use express.json. Let's just go ahead and, install this. So we would also have some sessions where I will tell you about, some libraries you can use that I think will be very important, if you're working with Node to build your application. So it doesn't matter, right? It can be any framework. The framework doesn't matter. I think it's mostly understanding how to, use some of these libraries. So right now we have Express installed, and I think that is, primarily the main, package we need. All right. We don't necessarily need to install libraries like UUID because we'll just go ahead and work with the default MongoDB ID, right? So let's go ahead and open up this project in VS Code. I know most of us are familiar with VS Code. Right, so let's see what we have here. I think I would have to also zoom in on this. So zoom in. Oh, come on, zoom in. All right, so I believe we can see this very well. I hope so. If you want me to zoom in again, just let me know. Okay, so let's start by writing some basic boilerplate Express code. So I'm going to say const express equals require express, which is our main Express library, of course. And I'm going to say, oh yeah, I think we actually forgot to install Mongoose because we'll be working with Mongoose. mongoose. All right, so npm hi mongoose. While that is installing, we can basically bring that up already. So we can say mongoose equals require mongoose. So I'm sure most of us already know how to work with our .env file, right? I'm just going to use that here, not really necessary, but I want to have our port in here. I'm going to run this on port 3000 eventually. So let's also install .env, right? So .env to aid us, in accessing some of the values we need from the env file. So I'm basically going to say require, that's double arrow. So we have .env.config, just like this. Okay, so now we have .env on our project. So I think the next thing we can do is to basically initialize our app. So we'll say our app equals express, and we can say our ports, right? Which is let's do this ports equals process.env.ports, right? Or 3000. If we choose to, work with any other port, and probably that is not found, it would always resolve to the default. So I can say the default would be 3000. All right. So I think the next thing we can do is to basically connect to MongoDB, right? Of course, using Mongoose. Okay, so in order to do that, we basically have to say mongoose dot connect mongoose dot connect, and we basically have to connect. So we're using our local DB for now. So MongoDB, I think this should be local host, local hosts. The the default port is 27 is it 27017? Yeah, I think that's correct. 27017. And of course, let's just call our database the book DB or just book. I think that is fine. Books, okay. So that works. All right. So hello, I can see Bashima, Israel, Omamoke, Jeffrey, and Olabiola. Welcome. All right, so let's continue. So now we are able to connect to, I think we can actually add some extra parameters. So yeah, but that is not necessary. So we can basically say use, I think this is meant to be use new URL parser, yeah, use new URL parser. I'm sure, I hope I'm not making a mistake here, but yeah, we'll test that of course. So that should be true. And we can basically, add our Mongo schema, right? So we can proceed to add our Mongo schema. Now I'm going to explain some of these things before I continue. So our Mongo's book schema. So basically, when you're working with Mongo's, the idea for using Mongo's is that if you decide to work with the MongoDB library itself, then you don't need to specify like a structure. Okay, Olabiola, if you can't see my screen, maybe you should check the quality from your end. If every other person have the same issue, let me know. Maybe I can close this so it can be bigger. All right, so I hope this is better. I think it's your network. You can verify that as well, please. Okay, so we're able to connect to MongoDB right here. The next thing would be to set up our schema. Yeah, so as I was saying, we work with the schema because you want to have a structure, right? So you don't have some data, that is not, so you don't have, we call it drift actually. So you don't have drift when you're actually saving your data, which means you can actually save a data that has maybe two parameters, maybe like a book that has a name and a title, like a title and a description maybe, and the next book does not have a description, but then it saves into your DB and you're not sure, right? So it's better to work with Mongoose. But if you're very sure and you're very confident in using MongoDB default library itself, of course, it's fine. I use it most times, without necessarily working with Mongoose. Yeah, so I hope you get the point. So we're going to define our schema here. But I think we can also just say app.listing so we can test this to make sure everything works fine. So we have our ports and we just have to, check this out if it works. So let's say console.log. I would say our app is launched, or our app runs on ports, and then we can basically just bring in the ports, right? Just to verify that this is running on this port. All right, so let's see from my terminal. I'm basically going to say nodemon server. So this is currently all right. Okay, so let's continue. Let's define our Mongoose schema. And for our schema, of course, I did not really, think of the items that would go in. But right now, I'm thinking we can have like the title, maybe like the book author, the genre, and maybe like a date, right? The date was published or something. So let's do that. I'm going to say we have the const book schema, right? And this is going to be a Mongoose. Dot schema, yeah, mongoose dot schema. Okay, so I think, yeah, this is good. And then we can have our title. Our title should be the string. Okay, and we can then have our author, right? So our author should also be a string. What else? What else? We can have the genre. That should be, yeah, welcome. I think I can see Godfrey and Mark. Welcome. So for the genre, we can also have a string, and they can call this published dates or maybe publication dates. Okay, so publication date, we can just, this should be a date type. All right, and we can then, after creating our schema, we need to finally set up a model, so we can say the book, right, which is our main model. It's going to be the mongoose.model, right? Yeah, the mongoose.model, and then we have to refer to the, what we want to call that model, which is book, of course, and then we have to then, reference the book schema. All right, so this is how it works, and yeah, we are actually good. Um, okay, so let's start, creating some of our routes. We're going to start by creating the route for creating a book, right? For creating a book. Let's just say create book, the route for creating the book, and then the route for fetching all the books, right? So let's call this fetch all books, right? Okay, so we need to accept JSON because basically we're going to be passing in JSON. So we can say app.use express.json. I hope that is correct. Yeah, I think so. So accept JSON body. Okay, so I have an error here. Oh, yeah, that's gone. All right, so let's create a book. We're going to define our routes right now. So we're going to say we have app.post because we need to post the data, of course. And we are basically going to say we want to post to the routes of /books based on what we defined earlier. So let's verify that /books, of course. Okay, so now that we have /books, we can then say this is an asynchronous function, of course, requests response, and we are going to basically test to see if this works. So I'm going to say console.log request.body, but I need to verify. I made a mistake here, so that has to be an arrow function, just like this. All right, so now we've saved this. Let's go to our browser and let's use the Talent API tester to verify if this works. So I'm going to say localhost, all right, so /books. Yeah, let's test this. So this is posts, and I'm basically going to create the body. So let's see. Okay, maybe I can just create a new document here, just to be very sure. Okay, so now we have copy S because this is on our local hosts books. All right, so for our body, I need to first change this to post, and then we're expecting application JSON. I was literally looking for this just now. And in order to add the body, oh yeah, click on this, okay? And we need to add our JSON body. So let's just try with, of course, our title, and this is going to be like JavaScript. Can I zoom in on this page as well? Yeah. Oh boy. Okay. Okay, that works. So JavaScript fundamentals. So let's say we have the author. Now this is a JSON. I'm basically composing a simple JSON right here. Okay. So the author would be I'll use my name Mav, and then we would have a genre. So let's say the genre would be software. Software engineering books, if you understand what I mean. Then the publication date, publication. Okay, so I we not really set any defaults there, so we can just say our publication dates. Let's just put a date here. So yeah, so for the date, I'm basically going to use I can say maybe yeah, I can basically say 2023. Okay. Um, of what's today's date? This is 15. Okay, so 15. And of course the month 04. Right? Does this work? So we have the title, author, general, publication date. What am I missing here? This is a post request. Okay, so if we send this, ideally, I need to abort this because there was a mistake. Okay, so of course we're fetching this item, but the mistake is we did not, like put like a response or something. So res.json request a body. If you don't do that, then it's going to, basically continue running until it's actually crash. So now I made a post request and we have our data here, right? That was sent. And yeah, so it says there was no response. Okay, so I'm trying to figure out why there was no response. Let's send this again. Okay. Okay, yeah. So we have our response now. Okay, so because I use the res.send, so we have our response. All right, so what we need to do, when we create a book, we basically need to, we basically need to use the model, right? So we just have to say we're creating a new book, right, which is the model, and then we put in our parameters. So I don't think that would be a big of a deal. Let's do that now. I'm going to say we have a new book, right, which is equals yeah, new book, which is our model. Remember, the book is our model that we have created right here. So that is our book. Okay, so we say equals new book, and we can proceed to put in that data. So we can say the title is equals the request dot body the title, and trust me, you can basically pass in the entire parameter here. You can basically pass in the entire request dot body in here. That would definitely work. I'm just going to do this manually so you understand what I mean. So, we are going to pass in the author, which is basically this. And I would also take it off so you understand me better. So we have author, and we also have the genre, which is going to be correct, yeah. So request the body, the genre. Okay, and finally we have, I think, the publication date. Let me just grab this from here. Publication date, which is going to be the request dot body dot publication date. Okay, so just to go back, let's go back here. Publication date. Okay, so this is good, right? And the next thing you want to do is, you need to save this. So you basically need to say, book.save. That is how you would save this. So now we have passed in that data. It is always a nice thing to verify, to perform validation, right? Data validation. We're not doing that right now, but you can do data validation with, Joy or AJV or Zod. We have a bunch of libraries out there you can use for data validation. Okay. All right. So, Okiki, Ariel, welcome. Okay, so now we have our new book. We just have to say new book, right? Dot save, right? And I think we can just call this a book instead. So book.save, and we need to pass. When we're saving this, we need to basically check if it's so we're saved, right? So we can say save book equals book.save, and yeah, so if our book is saved, we just want to then return the response here by saying array as the status. Our book was created. Created is 201. That is your status code when you create something. And we are also going to pass in, the saved book, right? So this is to tell us that, this was saved. And from here, we can basically get the ID, right? That will be returned when this is saved. All right, so book.save and we have res.status. Yeah, it's also a good idea to put this in a try and catch block, or you can also use the .then .catch, which is my preferred option. I would rather say book.save .then .catch, but let's just go with this for now. So let's catch the error if we have any error. And if there's any error, we basically want to say array as the status, 400, which means, of course, there was an error on our server, and I can say that JSON, tell me what really happened here, and pass it into the message. Tell me that this was the message, which is error.message. All right, so this is basically what I have. Let me just quickly format this, make sure everything is fine. All right, so we don't have an error. Let's verify if this still works. Nodemon server.js. All right. Okay. So I am going to make a request again with the same data, JavaScript fundamentals, math, software, and of course, the publication data as well. So if I send this, let's see what is our response. It says 201 created. But it did not give us the data, right? So it did not give us data. So even though it says created, we cannot see. Oh yeah, I think I figured that out. The reason is because we forgot to await. This is basically, yeah, this is basically an operation you have to await. So I'm actually assuming that our data is already saved, but we of course have to verify. And in order to verify, that would be very simple. We can just implement a simple route, and all we have to do is say book.find, right? So we can proceed to do that to fetch all the books. So we can just work with the same thing we have here. Well, basically this time around is a get request, by the way. So yeah, so we can simply say yeah, so we can simply say all books, of course, const equals book. And of course, we should await this as well. But find, right? And then we can, res.json, um, all books, all books. Right, so this is how simple it is. You want to probably put this in a try and catch block as well. Um, but yeah, always ensure that you don't just say try and catch without specifically, spitting out the errors. When there's an error, so it's a good idea to always, make sure if there's an error, you can actually say, okay, maybe something, an error occurred on the server, and you want to definitely tell us what happened. Is it a database error, right? What happened exactly? So you can call that error.message as well. All right, so I think this is fine. Let us use the get request now to verify. Okay, so we have an error. Let's see what happened. Um, okay, so I think I forgot this. Right. Okay, so let's go back here and we created a book earlier, but we need to verify if that book is currently saved, right? So let's just make a very simple get request, send this, and yeah, we actually have the author. Something is missing, right? Our title. So can you see that our title is actually missing? So let's go back to our code to verify. What did we miss here exactly? So yeah, I said tithe instead of title. That is wrong. Definitely, that is wrong. All right, so we can actually delete this, data, right? We can delete this data. If you have MongoDB Compass, this is basically, the easiest way to, have a GUI where you can work with MongoDB. The reason why I'm not going to do this from the terminal is because I already added this to a blog post I wrote earlier. I think this was last week or 2 weeks ago. Yeah, but we're not really concentrating on the CLI, the Mongo CLI. So I think you should check this out. Check out this tool, MongoDB Compass. We have some other tools. I basically have I think I have a tool called Studio 3T, and this is what I use basically, right? I can actually do more with this, and I love the tool. But yeah, this is a free tool from MongoDB, so we can connect to this database, and then we can look for the books, yeah, that we just created. So let's verify. It says it has one document, and of course, this should be the document that we have saved without the title, as you can see. So we can delete that, yeah, by simply clicking on this and deleting the record. All right, so right now we are going to create a new book again, right? So let's post our book, send. All right, now it says 201 created, and we have our book, including the title. So if we then make a GET request to the same endpoint, this is going to fetch that book. So it says 200, okay, and we have that book. So what if we create multiple books? So let's do that. I'm going to create multiple books this time around. We have Python fundamentals. I can say this is from Ella, and I'm also going to create this book. All right, that was successful. I can then create another book this time around. I can say from Bob, and we can call this Cloud Fundamentals. Still under software, but maybe we can just call this cloud genre. And I can send this. So now we have a new book from Bob. Let's also create another book from Amaka. This can be design fundamentals. All right, so now we have, I think, about 5 books and one final one, UI fundamentals from Samuel. Okay, so this is also under design. All right, so now we have created about 5 or 6 books. Let's verify by fetching all the books. So we can actually see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we have 5 books, right, in total. So now we've been able to, create our routes, our endpoints for creating a book and also for getting all the books, right? And I think it's high time we move down to the main, the main functionalities that we're looking for here, which would be the filter, paginate, and sort. All right. If you have any questions so far, please you can drop it in the chat so I can answer them before I proceed. But I am simply going to create. Yeah, I'm just going to call this paginate. Right. Let's start from filter. Let's work on the filter function. Okay, so in order to filter, we're basically going to ensure that we can filter through probably all the fields, right? We have multiple fields. We have the title field, the author field, the genre field, and also the publication date field. Um, and when somebody is trying to filter, I think it's also nice if we ensure that it is not case sensitive, right? So whether you use small letters or capital letter, we should be able to fetch that record. Um, yeah, so we're going to use a regular expression, a JavaScript regex function for that because it makes it easier for us. So I can say we're going to be performing filtering, and when we are making this filtering operation, we basically want to, work with any field, right, in our schema, and would use them as, query parameters. So I'm going to say we'll be working with any field, right, with any field on the schema as a query parameter, okay? Right, so let's say app.get, and we are going to use, let's see, this was books slash filter, okay? So we have books, right, slash books slash filter. And we are going to also ensure this is a synchronous request and our response, okay? Then we just have our function. All right, so let's just put in our try and catch block for now. So try catch, we have our error. If there's an error and we want to basically say res dot status, an error occurred, let's stick to 500.json, and we want to ensure we pass the right message, which would be our error.message if an error occurs. All right, so this is good. Now within the try block, we can basically pass our query parameters that would come into an object. We can call that object filter. All right, and let's just create an empty object for now. So the filter object. And next we will check, we have to check if the parameter was actually passed in, right? We really have to check if it was passed in. And we have to make it dynamic. So for now we have the title, the author, the genre, and the publication date, which are basically 4 possible options that might come in from the request being made, right? So we can just use a very simple if statement. You can also use like a function outside this block, which is something I would like to do in a real application instead of writing a bunch of if statements. Yeah, but I think the easiest way to, at least, brute force this and have something would be to write, a bunch of if statements. So let's do that first, okay? So request.query.title, right? And yeah, so we can basically say we have, if this exists, we can then add it into our filter. So let's call that filters, right? So we can have this inside the filters. We can call it the title, okay? So I think that makes sense. The title, and if we want to say, this is if we want to say this is basically case insensitive, we can actually use the regular expression like this, regular expression, and we can pass in that request, which is this right here. So we can basically pass this in. And if we specify with, small caps I as our flag, it shows that this is not case sensitive. So if this query parameter was passed, then mark it as case insensitive. All right, so I think I should, yeah, we should just have a single comment for that. So let us say if a query parameter was passed, which of course it should be passed, then mark it as case insensitive. I think that is fine. So we can actually pass in like a single parameter or even multiple parameters. So you can try to filter items based on the title and the genre, or based on just the genre, or even just the author. So I think now that we're checking for title, we should do the same thing. So you can use else if, else if, but I'm just going to stick to doing it this way. So if we check for author, we ensure that author right here, and of course the author right here. So we're going to create that author property. If the author was passed, if the genre was passed, then of course we'll have the same thing, right? Let's verify that everything is fine. Also right here. Okay, so I think that is, oh yeah, we have one last item, which is the publication date. The publication date is not a string, so we don't need this, right? Because it's not a string. We just want to say the filter dot publication date. I think it's kind of, let's verify this again. So the publication date, um, yeah, let me check. Oh yeah, so publication date looks like this. So it's actually camel case, yes, I am right. Okay. So publication date, correct. Okay, so we have the publication date, and yeah, we just have to say we want to append this, right? The entire item just the way it is, without making any change, because it is the exact match we'll be looking for, right? Yeah, so I think this works. Okay, so next we want to say the book that will be fetched, right? So we're going to basically say the model, which is book.find, and we're going to pass in the filter, right? So the filter is going to look like this. If you pass in the author, then we are going to have author, and then the value of that author right here, okay? So just like this, the author, the publication date, the value of publication date. So that is basically how it would appear inside the filter, because it's going to be an object, right? So it's going to be this, filter object. So this is, I can just say filter object that would be passed into our Mongo's command. Okay, so let's just call it that. So we're just going to pass in filters. All right, so are we missing something here? Okay, so I think if that works, and finally we just want to say res.json, give us the books that match with our filter. This should be books. It might be more than one book, obviously. All right, so let us see. I think we have an error. Do we have an error? Let's see. Aha, okay, so we don't have an error. Okay, so let's go through this again. So when we are filtering, we want to first, create the object for filtering. We want to then check, if this particular item, if this particular filtering parameter exists as a query parameter. go ahead and make sure it is not case sensitive, and add the value into, so when you add this, it means it's going to then have something like this, right? So if our title is maybe JavaScript fundamentals, right? So it's basically going to add it exactly like this, right? This is basically what you're going to have, okay? So I hope you understand that. And it's going to do that for the rest of the items before making this request. And of course, we await this and we send out our response. So let's try this and see what we have. We currently have 5 books. So I want us to filter the Python fundamentals using the title. Then we can also filter for the genre. So let's try this. So I'm going to say we're making a request. This is a get request, and it has to be book/filter, right? And then we are going to use the query parameter just like this. Okay, so I'm going to say add parameter, and then we have that is the value, and that should be title. I am not mistaken. I don't need the slash. So book/filter title equals Python fundamentals, right? So if I send this, this gives us a 200, okay, and we have that book right here. If we search for like a genre, so let's search for a genre, and I'm going to basically say software or maybe design. So just like this, if I search for this, it's going to give us the books that falls under design, which is design fundamentals and UI fundamentals from Samuel. So this is how you filter, your database using Mongoose. So it's quite simple, right? If you have any question, I would share this code with you, by the way. And of course, I think when I share this with you, please go ahead and modify this. There are so many ways you can modify this. This is not a clean code. You can basically have a function that you make a request to, and yeah, it's possible to actually do this elsewhere with an helper function, and then you can pass in the entire request.query. So you allow this happen somewhere else instead of doing this within your block of your controller block. Okay, it will be better if you do that elsewhere. So let's go drop a comment here and say find the books based on the filter params. Okay, filter params. Right, so I think that is fine. The next thing we'll be looking at right now is let's take a look at our diagram. That will be to paginate this, right? So let's do that. So to paginate, we're basically going to have the same. So we're going to say app.get book/paginate, right? So app.get, and that should be books/paginate. Okay, is that correct? Yes, that is correct. So this is asynchronous request response, and we have our function. I keep making this mistake. So this is our pagination. Now the thing is, when we are performing pagination, there are some specific parameters that we would, of course, like to check for. So for example, we need to know, okay, which page is being requested for. Is it page 1? Is it page 2? And in that page that we're requesting for, what exactly do we want to be the size? The size of that page. So for example, on page 1, you can say you need 10 items, right? Or you can limit it to even 2 items. You can say every page, we just need 2 items per page. So on page 1, we want to see like item 1 and 2. On page 2, then we're going to skip item 1 and 2 and then get item 3 and 4, right? When you're working with pagination, one thing that you would definitely want to do is at least understand the way to skip, to skip the previous items when you're moving from one page to the other, right? And you need to also have some defaults. So, for example, if somebody does not pass in the page size, or if somebody does not pass in a specific page as a query parameter, you also want to give them something, right? Which means you should have a default page, right? So we can always set the default page to page 1. And this is something I tell people, you don't have to do a bunch of unnecessary implementation. You can make it simple. Of course, there are some use cases where you have to make it, you have to work on something more complex. We call that advanced search. If somebody is working with advanced search parameters, then they probably send in a bunch of query params, and then you have to play around with it. So there's always a logic to guide you, based on what you're building in the company or in your organization. There's always something to guide you on how to go about it. So we're going to make it simple, Very simple. We'll work with the page size, and we'll have a value that we can use to skip some of the pages, right? Which is what we refer to as uh, you know if you have worked with a relational database before, we call this limit and offsets, right? So you offset some pages, but in Mongoose, the command for that, the function for that is skip, right? So you skip. In relational DBs like Postgres, if you're using some kind of ORM, right? Not ODM here, but ORM for relational databases, you basically set the offset, and you then set the limits, right? So we want to offset this number of pages, but this should be the limit. Don't exceed this, limit. So let's do that. Let's do that. Let's first, put in our try and catch block. I would probably prefer to just copy this from here. This is our catch block, and then we have try, just like this. All right. So I think this is fine. Yeah. So now we can first ask for our page. So when this person is let's put that here. So when you're making pagination, we expect that when we need to work with page and the page size params, right? Of course, they are query params. So let's specify that here. And yeah, so let's see. So now we have the const page. We can simply grab the request.query page, right? The page, and we want to also specify if the person did not pass in any page. Let's work with page one, right? So if this is not passed, if this is not passed into the query param, we work with page one. And I think it's also a good idea to make sure you pass this as an integer. Just in case somebody adds a string value or something, right? So let's just pass this as an integer, and of course we can do the same for the page size. If the page size is passed in, right? And yeah, we can also call the page size. And by default, it depends on how you choose to set the amount of items you want on every page. It can be 5 items, it can be 10 items, it can be 20 items per page. In our use case, let's use 2, and I'm using 2 because we only have 5 data, right? I'm using just 2. If you are building a project and you want to test with a large amount of data, you can always check out a website like Mokaru. So we have Mokaru, which is a website where you can generate mock data, you can generate mock JSON data, mock SQL data, right? It's a random data generator and API mocking tool. I use this a lot. I'm not going to open it right now. You can check it out. We have a session where we will talk about Mokaru in details. I would explain, how you can generate a lot of mock data, whether it's SQL data or CSV or JSON. It generates a bunch of data. So we'll talk about that when we also learn how to use Stoplight Studio in one of the upcoming sessions. Right, so let's go back to our code and let's continue. So we have the page size, and now that we have the page size, we can then set, our skip value, right? So I want us to set our skip value. Our skip value is going to be basically, the value to tell us. So let's say we have the const and we call this skip. So we're going to basically say, the skip value is going to be the current page, right, minus 1. You always want to minus it from the previous page because you're moving by 1 step, right? And you also want to multiply this by the page size, right? So you want to multiply this by the page size. So when it skips, it's going to look at the page size to know the previous amount of items it fed you, right? Then you are currently in page 2. So it's going to basically say, that page 2, if you are looking for page 2, of course, page 2 minus 1, which means, okay, this guy is in page 2, that is what he requested for. And if I minus this, we only have 1, obviously, and now we have to multiply it by the page size, which was the previous size, that you set here. If you have a size of 10, then it's going to multiply it by 10, which means it's going to skip what? It's going to skip the first 10 items, right? And it's going to start from the 11th item. Okay, if you're requesting for page 3, right, it's going to then say 3 minus 1, which is 2. Then it's going to multiply 2 by the page size. Now, since you're on page 3, it means you're currently working with a page size of 10, for example. It's going to then give us, a 3 minus 1 here, which is 2. Then 2 multiplied by the page size, which is what? The page size, as I said earlier, is 10, which means we need to skip the first 20 items and start giving us from item 21, right? Down to item, item 30, basically, right? So I hope you understand that. So let's proceed. So now we have our skip constant value. And we are also going to just say we have like the total books that we expect to have right now. After performing the skip operation, we're going to say this is equals a weight, and now we're going to call the book, right, which is our model. So we're going to say give us the entire books because we want the person working with this API to understand that we have more books, right? Which is why we always append this, and you will see that in a moment. Even when you are making that paginated response, you want to tell them if you have some other items that they would need to probably check out because you have other items in your repository. So you can probably do that using the count documents um, function from Mongoose. And we can then fetch our books now. So our books would be equals await book.find, of course. And then you want to find all the books, but you have to skip, right? You have to skip the value of our skip, which is what we have right here. And we want to then set a limit, right? You always want to set a limit because you don't want it to exceed, that limit. So let's work with page size. If you don't set the limit, it's going to skip and then give you the rest of the items down to the end, right? Which is already, going against, the amount of, items you want to see. So you basically say book.find, then you skip. You have to skip, based on your calculation here, and you have to then limit this by the page size. So now we're going to return the books and the total books just to tell them that, yeah, we still have some other books. In total, we have 100 books. What you're seeing right now is just 10. You can basically make more requests to see the other books, okay? So we can simply say res.send. I think we can use the JSON. That is what we have to use. And we have to say the books. We want to send the books and also the total books, right? Yeah, right. So that is what we want to have. So let's see. Total books right here, books right here. Are we missing anything? I don't think so. Okay, so now we have total books, we have the books, we have our skip value. I would like to add more comments to this. So um, we have defaults to 1 if a page was not passed in the query parameters. Okay, so the next item defaults to 2 if the page size was not passed in the query parameter. And so this is basically going to do our, skip computation. So computes for skip value. And this gives us total books in the collection, right? Okay. Finally, with this, we're able to fetch all books uh, and applied the pagination rules that we have set. Okay, so this is basically what we have now. Let's go ahead and check to see if our app still works correctly. That is fine. So right now what we have to do, and of course I told you earlier, you can also use the yeah, you can also use tools like Postman for this. Okay, you can always use tools like Postman for this. I don't have. Just give me a minute I want to see if I have if I can quickly spin up Postman. For some of you, I know you're already using Postman or Insomnia or something. Um, let's see if I can get that. Okay. Okay. So I think trying to really observe the other things I have opened on my laptop. So, to avoid slowing down my PC, let's just proceed here. I'm going to add, let's just work with this. So I'm going to use paginate. And when I'm paginating, I want to set the size, right? First of all, I want to set the page and also set the page size, right? So for our page, let's just set page 1. So for our page size, let's add that. So I'm going to call this page size. So on every request, give me 2 data, right? 2 items. So this is /book /paginate. Our page is page 1, page size is page 2. If I send this request, let's see what we have. We have 2 records and it tells us we have a total of 5 books. So right here we have the first item, which is Mav and the JavaScript fundamentals. And we have the second item, which is Python fundamentals from Ella. And I hope you saw that, right? You saw that JavaScript fundamentals. and the second item was Python fundamentals. If I then decide to get page 2, and of course stick to the same page size, this is going to skip those first 2 records, and it's going to give us the next 2 records, which is cloud fundamentals, and it's probably going to give us design fundamentals from Amaka. Okay, so if you also choose to say I want every single page to be free, give us page 1. I'm going to send this request. So now we have 3 items, which is JavaScript fundamentals, Python fundamentals, and the cloud fundamentals. All right. Yeah. So if I fetch page 2, I send this. So now we basically have 2 items, not 3, because we only have 5 items here. So the second item, the second page gives us the design fundamentals and the UI fundamentals from Samuel. So I believe you understand how this works. I will share the code with you when we are done. The final thing I think we need to look at right now would be sorting. So let's quickly do that. We are just 2 minutes. We just have 2 minutes. Yeah. So let's talk about sorting. All right. So basically, what we'll be doing with sorting is, of course, it's primarily you're going to be sorting in ascending or descending order. So while working with, so we're going to work with a single, not a single, but 2 query parameters. The first one will be the sort. You want to sort with a specific key, right? So we can call it the sort key. And when I mean sort key, or probably we can use sort field. So it can either be we're sorting with title, or the author, or the genre. So we can basically sort that. And at the end of the day, we want to make sure we're sorting this with a specific order. So I'm going to call that I think the sort order, right? So we have the sort field and the sort order. Is that correct? Yeah, that works. So the sort order is going to give us either ascending or descending order. All right, so let's go ahead and say we have the app.get as well, and we have books/sorts, and of course this is asynchronous. We have to get our requests and our response. All right, and right now we can fetch those 2 query params. Let's first start by having our try. Simply going to grab this again, which is our catch. Okay. All right, and we can just say the first thing, which is our sort field. So we have our sort field right here. I'm going to say our sort field. We want to pass the request query, but we can simply call this the sort field, right? Or we can just call this sort. I think that works. So if there's no sort, if it wasn't passed in, let's always make sure we sort by the title by default. So this is going to be, of course, a string, right? If it was not passed in, because now we are basically expecting it. So if it doesn't come in, we need to have a default, all right? So yeah, I think the next thing would be to say const sort order, right? Equals request dot query dot order, yeah, order can, yeah. So we're expecting order, or I can also. So I basically don't like specifying items that I always like to use a single word, especially for my query params. Sometimes a single word will not work, and you have to do underscore or maybe capital, this camel case thing. I always prefer having it simple like this. So now we have the order. So uh, by default, um, our order should be maybe descending or ascending. You can actually specify, right? You can actually specify. But one thing we could do, let's see, what can we do here? Okay, so we're basically going to expect the order, but I think what we could do is to specify a particular type, a particular flow. If what we get is descending, right? If it's not descending, then it should be ascending, because the way the sort order actually works when you are sorting with Mongo with MongoDB and Mongoose, you're basically going to pass in -1 or 1, right? One meaning ascending, and -1 meaning descending. So you can't actually. I think what we can just do is to say if this is equals descending, then set the sort order to be -1, right? Else set the sort order to be 1. So this is also similar to saying, if the sort order equals, descending. So if this is not here, right, then I can just say, the sort order, right, should be equals -1, right? Else, well, I think that is too long, okay? So which is why I think this is very, what happened here? Take it off, take it off, take it off. Okay. So this is actually short, and this can do the job. So because we need to pass in either -1 or 1. So if it's ascending, to work with 1, if it's descending, to work with -1. I think this is simple enough to get the job done. So let us simply say our book, right? So the books we're going to fetch is equals await the book dot find, and we're basically going to say dot sort. Yeah, because this is what you want to do. So we need to first pass in the sort field. That is very important that you pass in the sort field. So sort field. I hope that's correct. Yeah, sort field. So it's going to then, use the sort order, which is, either -1 or 1 to specify the sort order. But since we are going to pass that in as a query parameter, let's also work with this. Yeah, so I think I have an error here. So why do we have this error here? So we say book.find sort, and then we have our sort field. Oh, right, because we are passing an object when we did not put in the object. Correct. Correct. Okay. So now we have our object. So finally, we just have to say response.json, right? It has to be JSON books. Yeah, because after finding the books, await books.find sort, you want to return the books that you found. Then if there's an error, it will tell us there's an error right here. So I think this works, right? By default, there will be the title. But if you pass in something else, and it will not work with the title. So what we can just do, let's save this, check this out, okay? So I can just come in here and basically change this to sort. And right here, I can pass in the I call that sort and order. So I can say we want to sort on the name, right, which is the author, and the order. So the order, we want this to be ascending, right? So we want this to be ascending. So we're sorting on the author, and the order is ascending. If I send this request, we now have the author. Amaka comes first, followed by Bob, followed by Ella, as you should expect, followed by Marv, and finally Samuel. So this is actually sorted properly. If we try that again this time around, let's sort to the title of the books. I send this. So now we see we have cloud comes first, which is Bob. So it's working with the title now. Design next, okay. So C, D, just like that, and JavaScript, right? Python, and the UI fundamental. So sort works. You can always swap this around. You can choose to sort based on the first item and the last item. So if we sort with the publication dates right here, and the order is ascending. Let's see what we get. So basically, it started with the first item that was created, of course, followed by the second item. So if we decide to use DESC, which is descending, and that works. So now this is probably not working, right? This is probably not working. So let's check if we have any error. All right, so because it's unable to determine, if this value is actually ascending or descending, this is a date value. So yeah, I think I understand that date value. Of course, that request was wrong. Um, there's a better way to actually try to fetch perform sorting with dates, right? Working with last created, first created. You might not be able to work with this date specifically, but then we can actually specify to have a default date. So the reason why this is like this, I think the dates should actually work, but the reason why this is like this is because we use exactly the same date when we're creating all the items, right? Exactly the same dates, and of course the same time value here. So I think that is the exact problem. Assuming we use different dates, I believe this should have worked, okay? Let's try sorting with the genre. So genre, right? So if we sort this, in descending order, we have, hope I spelled that correctly. I think I did. Okay. So What if we then swap this to ascending, and then we test this one more time? Yeah, so it starts with the cloud, just like that. So yeah, that is correct. Right. So now we currently have our code base, giving us these functionalities, sorting, pagination, and filtering. Of course, you can always choose to add more functionalities to this, like updating the records, deleting the records, right? I think this is something you can have fun doing. If you go ahead and implement it, feel free to share it with me. It is not an assignment, but if you share it with me on the server, I'll basically review it, make the code better, right? Add more comments, and of course make it even easier to read. For something like this, I would like you guys to definitely make this better, right? Having a bunch of ifs this way is not very good, but you can create a function outside and then use a simple, a single function, pass the entire request dot query, and perform these operations in the function you have out here. Then you return the queries, right? You return the filters, right? So perform this in a different function, and I can actually do that now, but I think you guys can go ahead and do it. If you understand what I mean. Let me quickly look at the questions because I have spent extra 8 minutes. So I'm going to look at the chat to see if we have any question. So you are asking Zedic, when you fetch all books, you didn't send back a status code. Does it mean it is mandatory? All right. So when we fetched all books and we did not send back a status code, basically it's not mandatory, but it's a good idea that you send a status code. So I said fetch all books, and basically I can just say the status, on a successful request, we're not creating anything. So on a successful request, you can send back 200 because that's a success, right? And if it fails, we send back 500. I would show you later. I would later show you how to work with. It's not good to statically type these things in, right? We don't do that. So there are better ways to structure this. So please try to put in the status code. It's always better if you have the front-end developers working with the status code that you specify, so that they can have something to use in checking if there's a successful if the request was successful or it's failed. If you don't want to work with this, you can also decide to append, kind of like a status, and you can say okay, right? Um, then you can say data, right? So this is something that works. So you can do this, okay, so that the front end guys can always verify with your status. If it fails, you can say failed, right? So we'll talk about this in a different session, though. You can add the status code. All right, so Zedek is asking, can we use if, else, if, or switch? Yeah, you can use switch, right? You can use switch. I personally love it. When I see people making their, at least using functional patterns at some, positions, especially when it comes to something like this. Wrap everything in a different function. You can use your switch statements in that function, but make your controller code clean and simple, right? Um, Ideally, I won't do this. In a real project scenario, if you have worked with me before, if there's anybody on Discord or have worked with me on a project, you should know very well that this request, would be coming from my repository, file, right? Because I don't like to mix my controller and the code handling database operations in the same place. Okay, so what my controller would mostly do is data validation, and making a request to the repository and grabbing this from the repository, if it's successful. And of course, I told you earlier that you don't necessarily need to do this. You can basically just pass in the entire request of body, right? So long you've done your validation, now you have lesser code. I love it when I see less code that is functional and makes a lot of sense. And of course, we can try this as well, just for validation in case something goes wrong. Before I share the code with you, we can basically try to create a new. So let's take this off, and let's see. We're going to make a post request. We're going to create a new book. This time around, I can call this systems design, the MAV, and this is architecture. Right, so let's just stick to the same date. So if I send this and if it's successful, it says 201 created. So that was successful, even though we have reduced the amount of code we had here. And then now that that is successful, if we decide to fetch every single item, of course, as expected, we should have the new book that was created alongside. So right here, systems design. All right, so I hope this is straightforward enough. Zedic is asking, what is the right folder naming for a folder holding the filter function? Yeah, you can call that an helper. I mean, there's no specific. You just have to. I would call it an helper function, right? I would create packages, right? And then within the packages, I would have my book package, right? Because it is my book package. If I have other packages like users, um, my user package, right? So within the book package, I can then have my controller.js. I usually call this a handler, right? I prefer calling this a handler because I'm basically coming from a background where this would be the right name for it over there. But in JavaScript, most people know this as a controller, and that is where my controller code will be stored. Then I have my model, which is where I can put in, the mongoose model and schema. I can put everything in here, or I can also choose to separate it and have my schema separate, right? Not bad. It's good to have modular code. And now we have our repository, which is repository, right? Some people would call this query.js, but basically repository is my preferred name because in here I want to make sure I'm performing all my database functions, right? And if you have some specific helpers that are specific to this module, I can just create an helper file. Right now, you might be saying this is too much, but at the end of the day, you need to understand, the simplicity because I can basically delete this package and it won't affect any other part of my code, right? I can choose to replace this entire package with a new code that works, and this is safe and clean, right? Someone said, I can't see what you're doing right now. I think that is your network. Can any other person see my screen? Zedic, can you see what I'm doing right here? Let me know in the chat. Okay, so this is just an example. You can choose to have fun with this. Wrap everything we have in here into the book package, and that would make a lot of sense. Okay, it would look clean and simple. Yeah, I think that is something you should try. So Zedic is still saying we cannot see. What exactly can you see? I'm currently showing you my VS Code. Emanuela, can you see my VS Code screen?
It's frozen at the same time. It's blank. Mav, can you hear me?
Hello, Ella.
Yes, can you hear me? So your screen is frozen.
Okay.
Can you hear me,
I
Mav?
can't hear you, Ella. Can you guys hear me?
Hear me, but
Oh,
I
you
can
can't
hear
hear
you.
me, but I can
Yeah, I
hear
can
you.
hear you now. I can hear you now. So,
Okay, your screen is frozen.
okay, okay, that's fine. I'm going to stop.
So if you could stop sharing and share again.
Yeah, yeah, I'll do that right now. Yeah, apologies for that. I'm sharing again right now. So what about now? Can you see this?
Oh yes, your VS
Okay.
Code. We can see it.
Thank you. Okay, so this is what I was actually creating. I created this directory, packages, books, controller, helper, model, repository, and schema. This is how I structure my project. For scenarios where you can decide to switch your entire framework to a new framework, and it will not affect your core code, right? Your code will still work perfectly. You finally have like we don't have enough time. I would have shown you how I would split everything, to make everything match and work inside these folders. If you're able to put everything here, I can switch my framework from Express to Nest.js to Core.js, right, to Happy.js or any other framework I want to use, and it will still work perfectly. All I have to do is ensure that I have my routes pointing to the the right the right functions, because all I would have here are functions, not necessarily, um, yeah, not necessarily code related to my framework. All right. So this is what I do in a real world scenario. When I have a team working on a project, they can easily look into a folder and they have everything related to the books. Right. So inside the routes, I would have all my routes structured here the way I structured it earlier, right here. So all these routes will be inside the route file, and then the routes point to specific controllers. So the route only has access to controllers. Controllers has access to the repositories, right? And also, has access to the repository, and then the repository has access to the model and the schema. Then any other file has access to the helper because the helper only carries specific functions that they can use, for specific tasks. Okay, so the way it is, decoupled makes your code easier to play around with. Okay, and if you have heard of something like the onion architecture, um, please, will you share the code? I will share the code with you, definitely. I will share this repository with you. It would be on the blog post, so you would have the blog post. I see a lot of people have dropped off the call already. We have spent too much time. So thank you very much, guys. I hope you enjoyed this session. If you have more questions, I'll be on Discord right now. So feel free to come to the Discord server, your room, and you can ask your questions and I will attend to you, all right? So thank you very much, and thank you very much, Ella. I think that will be all from me.
Okay, thank you so much, Mav, for today's class. Thank you so much. So please, you've heard your instructor, Mr. Marvelous. So go back to Discord and ask your question. And also, we have a Q&A session tomorrow by 9 p.m. on Discord. So please do well to attend by 9 p.m. tomorrow. And also, we have a Twitter space by 6 p.m. West African time. So please make sure you schedule a time and make sure you attend. So we have two events for tomorrow: a Twitter space by 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. for the back end Q&A session. So thank you everyone for joining today's class. Bye everyone. And also we have a class by 8 p.m. So please make sure you attend. Bye everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mav. Bye.